Hey guys, tonight we are going back, way back. We're going to a time when the Great Lakes were just being born, clawed into existence by a force of unimaginable power. You're standing on the edge of a world that is being unmade and remade, moment by moment. The air is thin, bitingly cold, and carries the scent of raw earth and melting ice. Forget your comfortable bed and your central heating. Out here, the night is an entity, and a single mistake, a twisted ankle or a lost trail, means you simply don't wake up. You almost certainly wouldn't survive this. But for the people who did, a secret was waiting, a metal that would change their world thousands of years before the first pyramid was even a whisper of an idea. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. That small click sends a big signal to the algorithm that long-form, serious educational content still matters. And to me, it's an incredibly meaningful show of support. Thank you so much for helping keep this channel going strong. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your world is dominated by ice. For 1,000 generations, it has been the northern wall of reality, a shimmering mountainous continent of frozen water that defines the horizon. This is the Laurentide ice sheet, a geological titan miles thick in places, so heavy that its weight has pressed the very crust of the earth down into the mantle. For millennia, its slow, grinding advance was an unstoppable force. But now it is dying. The great cold is breaking, and the ice is in retreat. You stand on the land it is surrendering, and you feel the change not just in the air, but in the ground beneath your feet. The process is so slow, it's imperceptible day to day, but its effects are everywhere. The sound, for one, is a constant companion. It's a soundscape no human will ever hear again. During the day, it's a chorus of trickles and gurgles as the sun works on the surface of the ice wall. This is punctuated by the sharp crack of new crevasses opening and the deeper groaning reports of immense internal pressures shifting within the glacier. Now and then, a sound like distant thunder rolls across the landscape as a skyscraper-sized slab of ice calves from the face of the wall, crashing into a temporary lake at its base. Scientists have calculated the sheer volume of water being released daily during the final melt, but they can only guess at the sheer, overwhelming noise of it all. It's the sound of a world being born. The landscape the ice leaves behind is alien, brutal, and raw. It's a world scraped clean. The soil is gone, planed right off down to the bedrock, which is scarred with deep parallel grooves marking the direction of the glacier's flow. There are no gentle rolling hills here, only gouged-out basins and long, teardrop-shaped ridges of gravel and debris called drumlins. Water is everywhere. It pools in every depression, forming countless new lakes and ponds. This water is a strange, milky turquoise, thick with suspended rock flour, stone ground to a fine powder by the ice. These are the infant Great Lakes, their basins carved and deepened by the ice, now slowly filling with its lifeblood. The air that flows off the ice sheet is a unique phenomenon, a constant, refrigerated wind that dictates the terms of life. It keeps the summers short and cool, and the winters almost unimaginably severe. The land is a patchwork quilt of tundra and fledgling spruce forest. Mosses, lichens, and hardy grasses are the first to reclaim the naked stone, creating a thin, fragile skin of life. Into this new, raw world, you have followed the great beasts. You are part of a small family band of Paleo-Indian hunters. Mainstream history confirms that your people were the first to witness this grand unveiling of a continent. Archaeologists still argue about the exact routes and timing of your arrival, but they all agree on one thing. You were masters of survival in a landscape that was actively hostile to human life. You carry a long spear, tipped with a masterfully crafted stone point, its edges sharper than any modern steel. Your life revolves around the herds. You follow the colossal, shaggy shapes of woolly mammoths, the slightly smaller but no less formidable mastodons, and the great, straight-horned bison. Their bodies provide everything: meat for sustenance, thick hides for shelter and clothing, fat for fuel, and bone and ivory for tools and ornaments. You stand on a high, stony ridge, looking out over this immense, empty world. The ice wall still looms to the north, a source of endless cold and strange noises. Below you, a herd of caribou moves through a sparse forest of stunted spruce. Your existence is precarious, balanced on the razor's edge of your skill as a hunter and your deep, intimate knowledge of this new land. But the retreating ice has left more than just rock and water. Scattered across the scoured plains, nestled in the gravel of the riverbeds, and lying plainly on the shores of the new lakes, is a secret. A strange type of stone, a gift from the deep earth, delivered by the ice. It's a stone that doesn't shatter, a stone that glows with the color of the setting sun. You don't know it yet, but it will become the foundation of a mystery that will endure for the next 10,000 years. Your life is held together by sinew and sharp edges. Your entire existence and that of your family depends on a suite of tools crafted from the world around you, a technology perfected over countless generations. At the heart of this toolkit is stone. In your hand, you hold a masterpiece of lethal design, a spear point made from a piece of high-quality chert, its color a milky gray swirled with bands of darker slate. It is a Clovis point, a tool so effective and distinctive that its presence defines an entire chapter of human history on this continent. It's leaf-shaped, 3 or 4 inches long, with a concave base and razor-sharp edges. Down its center, on both sides, a long, shallow channel, or flute, has been expertly removed. Anthropologists still debate whether this iconic flute was a clever technological innovation to aid in hafting it to a spear shaft, or if it served a more ritualistic purpose, a channel for the blood of the animal to flow. To create this tool is to engage in an intimate conversation with the stone. The process, flintknapping, is not brute force. It is an art of immense skill and intellectual depth. You must first find the right material, a stone with a fine, consistent grain, free of cracks or inclusions. Some of the best stone, like the glossy black obsidian or the richly colored cherts from certain sacred quarries, is so prized that it travels hundreds of miles through ancient trade networks. This is a quirky fact of your time. A good piece of rock is worth more than almost anything else. You hold the core stone in one hand and a hammerstone in the other. You are not just chipping away. You are reading the stone, feeling for its internal tensions, seeing the finished point already existing within the rough exterior. The science behind it is a phenomenon called conchoidal fracture. Unlike a piece of wood that splits along a grain, siliceous stone like flint or chert breaks like glass. When you strike the edge at the correct angle with the right amount of force, a shockwave travels through the stone, shearing off a curved, shell-shaped flake. Every strike is a decision. A large, heavy hammerstone of granite is used for the initial shaping, removing big flakes to establish the rough form. Then you switch to a softer hammer, perhaps a heavy piece of moose antler, for the finer thinning work. The final delicate sharpening of the edges is done with pressure flaking, using the pointed tip of an antler tine to press off tiny, precise flakes, creating an edge that can effortlessly part the thick hide of a bison. Seeing a master napper at work is like watching a sculptor and a grandmaster chess player rolled into one. Every move is calculated, thinking several steps ahead to achieve that perfect, symmetrical, deadly form. Of course, your world is not built from stone alone. The rest of your toolkit is a testament to your ingenuity with organic materials. The shaft of your spear is a perfectly straight length of ash or hickory, fire-hardened and smoothed with sandstone. The point is bound to the shaft with cordage made from twisted plant fibers and the long, powerful sinews from a deer's back leg. This binding is then sealed with a glue made from boiled pine, pitch, and charcoal. You carry bone needles drilled with a stone awl for sewing your caribou hide clothing. Antler is used for tools that need to be tough but not brittle, like the pressure flakers for your stonework. Wood becomes the frame for your shelters, the bowls you eat from, and the life-giving fire you create with a hand drill. It's a complete and elegant system, perfectly adapted to your environment. But for all its elegance, your toolkit has a fatal flaw. It is a world of absolutes. Your tools are either perfect or they are broken. There is no in-between. Wood rots if it isn't kept dry. Sinew can stretch and loosen in the damp. Bone can be strong, but it can also snap under stress. And stone, for all its sharpness, is unforgivingly brittle. A perfectly crafted point that took you hours to make can be ruined in a heartbeat. Drop your spear on a rock, and the tip might shatter. A miscalculated strike during the knapping process, a hidden flaw in the material, and the entire piece can break in your hand. This brittleness is the constant nagging anxiety at the back of your mind. Imagine the scene. You've been tracking a lone mastodon for 2 days. It's an old bull, separated from its herd, a mountain of meat and hide and ivory that could sustain your family for the entire winter. You are running, your heart pounding in your ears, the frigid air searing your lungs. The beast is wounded, tired, but still incredibly dangerous. You find your moment, closing the distance as it crashes through a stand of young spruce. You plant your feet, summon all your strength, and drive your spear forward, aiming for the vital spot behind the massive shoulder. You feel the impact, a solid, promising thud. But instead of the satisfying slide of the point sinking deep, there is a sharp, sickening crack that you feel all the way up the shaft into your bones. The spear bounces back, its end uselessly splintered. Your beautiful stone point, your lifeline, has struck a rib and shattered into a dozen useless fragments. The mastodon, enraged and wounded, turns. And in that moment, the central limitation of your world is laid bare. Your technology, as brilliant as it is, can fail you catastrophically at the one moment you cannot afford it to. You need something more. You need a material that can endure. The memory of the failed hunt is a stone in your belly. The hunger is real, but the frustration is worse. Your world is one of thin margins, and the shattering of that spear point was more than an inconvenience. It was a stark reminder of the fragility of your existence. So now you walk with a different purpose. You are not hunting game, but stone. Your eyes, trained to spot the slightest movement of a deer in the brush, are now scanning the ground, searching for a better piece of chert, a new cobble of quartzite, anything that promises a cleaner break and a sharper, more durable edge. You are walking the shoreline of a vast, unnamed lake, one of the giants carved out by the ice. The water laps at a beach made not of sand, but of gravel and stones of every shape and size, a jumble of rock types dragged from hundreds of miles away and deposited here by the melting glacier. The air is damp, the sky a high, pale blue. The only sounds are the rhythmic wash of the waves, the cry of a gull, and the whisper of the wind through the sparse spruce trees that have gained a foothold on the raw earth. Your gaze sweeps across the endless field of grey, brown, and black stones. You are looking for that specific, waxy luster of good flint, the telltale conchoidal scars on a piece that has been broken naturally. And then you see it. It's not what you were looking for. Not at all. Lying half submerged in the shallow, clear water is a stone unlike any you have ever seen. Most of its surface is covered in a chalky, pale green crust, like a lichen you don't recognize. But where the water's current has tumbled it against other rocks, that green crust is worn away, and the stone beneath gives off a warm, reddish gold gleam that seems to catch and hold the sunlight. You wade into the numbing water and pick it up. The first surprise is the weight. It is shockingly heavy. You've handled thousands of stones in your lifetime. You know their heft, their balance. This piece, no bigger than your fist, feels twice as heavy as a granite cobble of the same size, as if it's packed with some unseen density. Its coolness in your palm is profound, a deep, solid cold that seems to drink the warmth from your skin. This is a scientific reality you are feeling. The high thermal conductivity of metal, pulling heat away from your hand far faster than any normal stone. You turn it over and over. The reddish gleam is not a reflection. It seems to come from within the stone itself. It feels powerful. In a world where unusual things are often signs from the spirits, a find like this is heavy with meaning. You think of stories passed down about stones that fall from the sky, meteorites, that are said to be the solidified essence of a thunderclap. Perhaps this is something similar, a piece of the Earth's concentrated spirit. You carry it back to the shore and set it down on a large, flat boulder that serves as your workbench. Your curiosity, the same instinct that drives you to understand the habits of animals and the properties of plants, takes over. You need to know what this thing is. You pick up a hard quartzite hammerstone, the kind you'd use for rough shaping. Your mind knows exactly what should happen next. When you strike the strange stone, it should either crack apart, revealing its inner grain, or it will be so hard that it's the hammerstone that shatters. Those are the rules of your world. You lift the hammerstone and bring it down with a sharp, controlled blow. The result is impossible. There is no sharp crack of fracturing rock. Instead, there is a dull, metallic clang, a sound that vibrates through the hammerstone and up your arm. And the greenish rock does not break. It does not shatter. Where your hammerstone struck it, there is now a bright, gleaming dent. The reddish gold color is revealed, shining and brilliant. The stone has yielded. It has moved, it has changed shape under the force of the blow without breaking. You stare at it, your mind struggling to process this violation of natural law. A stone that bends. You strike it again, harder this time. Clang. Another dent appears, deeper this time. The edges of the first dent have flattened out, smeared slightly. You run your finger over the spot. It's smooth, metallic. This is the moment. Historians can only speculate whether this discovery was a single revolutionary event that happened to one person like you, or a slow, gradual realization that occurred in different places over hundreds of years. But the effect is the same. In your hands is a material that combines the properties of stone and the properties of things like hide or wood. It is heavy and hard like stone, but it doesn't shatter. It can be shaped and reshaped. A point made from this material wouldn't just shatter against a mastodon's rib. It might bend, it might get blunted, but it could be hammered back into shape. An awl made from this wouldn't snap when punching through thick leather. A fishhook wouldn't break when a powerful trout strikes the line. You don't know the word for it. You don't have a name for this substance. For now, it is just the glimmering stone, the heavy stone, the stone that bends. You don't yet envision complex socketed spearheads or great axes. The earliest uses of this new material will be simple, as all great technologies are at their birth. But as you sit there on the shore of the great water, hammering this strange nugget, you are not just shaping a piece of metal. You are hammering out the very beginning of a new age. The secret you are holding in your hand, that lump of gleaming, malleable stone, is a message from a world so ancient it is almost beyond comprehension. Its story did not begin with the grinding of the glaciers or the melting of the ice. To understand where it came from, you have to let your sense of time stretch and snap. You have to journey back, not 1,000 years or 100,000, but 1,000,000,000 years, to a time when the continent you stand on was tearing itself apart. The land that will one day become North America is unrecognizable, a part of a larger supercontinent called Rodinia. And at its heart, a colossal wound is opening in the Earth's crust. This is the mid-continent rift system. Imagine a fissure, thousands of miles long, splitting the land from modern-day Kansas up through Minnesota and Wisconsin, across the basin of the future Lake Superior, and down through Michigan. For millions of years, this rift bleeds lava, not in explosive cone-shaped volcanoes, but in vast, oozing floods of basalt that pour out from the planet's mantle, layer upon layer, thousands of feet thick. The sky is a permanent, choking twilight of volcanic smog, and the land is a sea of molten rock. The very air hisses and cracks with the heat. It is a violent, primordial scene, the planet in the throes of its own creation. This great tearing of the continent faltered and failed, but not before it set the stage for a geological miracle. As the volcanic activity slowed, the real magic began deep within the newly formed layers of basalt. The rock was porous, filled with gas bubbles, like a gargantuan piece of Swiss cheese, and fractured with deep cracks from the stress of cooling. Into this subterranean plumbing, water began to seep. This was no ordinary water. Heated by the residual warmth of the planet's mantle, it became a superheated, highly corrosive hydrothermal fluid. This fluid, a kind of natural chemical broth, was forced through the basaltic rock under immense pressure. As it moved, it acted as a powerful solvent, leaching minerals from the rock it passed through, picking up atoms of sulfur, silver, and, most importantly, copper. Geologists still debate the exact chemical triggers and conditions, but in this specific region, something extraordinary happened. As this mineral-rich fluid circulated through the cracks and voids in the basalt, it began to cool. The change in temperature and pressure forced the dissolved minerals to precipitate out of the solution. In most parts of the world, copper bonds with sulfur to form common sulfide ores like chalcopyrite. But here, for reasons unique to this geological event, the sulfur was largely absent. So, the copper atoms precipitated out all by themselves, growing into crystals of pure, elemental metal. This is what geologists call native copper. Over millions of years, this process filled the ancient gas bubbles, which are called amygdals, with pure, gleaming copper. It filled tiny cracks and vast fissures with sheets and veins of metal. Sometimes it pooled in enormous quantities, forming massive deposits that could weigh hundreds of tons. This wasn't copper ore, a greenish rock that needs to be crushed and smelted in a furnace to release a few percent of its metal. This was the metal itself, in a state of almost unbelievable purity, often greater than 99.9%. It was a planetary treasure chest, locked away deep underground. This is the crucial fact that makes your discovery on that lakeshore so significant. In most other parts of the world, from the hills of Cyprus to the river valleys of the Fertile Crescent, where metallurgy would later be born, native copper was exceedingly rare. People there found copper mostly in the form of colorful ores, the bright green of malachite, the brilliant blue of azurite. To them, metal was something trapped inside a stone, something that had to be liberated through the difficult and mysterious process of smelting. They had to invent high-temperature kilns, learn about fluxes and airflow, and master a complex chemical transformation to get their hands on a usable, but often impure, metal. But the world you inhabit is different. The legacy of the mid-continent rift means that you and your people are sitting atop the largest and purest deposit of native copper on the entire planet. The treasure isn't locked away. You don't need a key. You just need a way to get it out of the ground. For 1 billion years, it sat there in the dark, waiting. Then came the ice. For nearly 1 billion years, the great copper treasure lay sleeping in the dark. It was sealed deep beneath a thick blanket of younger rock, layers of sandstone and shale deposited by ancient seas, burying the volcanic basalt by thousands of feet. It was safe, inaccessible, and for all practical purposes, might as well have been on the moon. But the Earth is a restless planet. Continents drift, mountains rise and fall, and climates shift in great, slow cycles. And about 2.5 million years ago, the planet began to cool. The great ice ages began. From the north, the ice came. This wasn't the static, brittle ice of a frozen pond. This was a force of nature on a scale that defies the human imagination. The Laurentide ice sheet was a continent-sized glacier, born from millennia of snowfall that never melted. The snow compacted under its own colossal weight, turning into dense, blue, glacial ice that eventually began to move, to flow like an impossibly slow river. At its peak, it covered almost all of Canada and the northern United States, and in the region of the future Great Lakes, it was well over 1 mile thick. Its weight was so immense it warped the very crust of the planet. And as it grew and moved, it became the most powerful erosional force the world has ever seen. Think of it as a plow and a grinder of planetary scale. As the ice sheet advanced southward, the rock and gravel frozen into its base acted like cosmic-grade sandpaper. It ground down entire mountain ranges, turning them into hills, and turned hills into plains. But it was the softer rock that yielded first. The thousands of feet of sandstone and shale that covered the ancient basalt of the mid-continent rift were no match for the glacier's power. Over successive waves of glaciation spanning tens of thousands of years, the ice systematically scoured them away, planing the landscape down, layer by layer, until the ancient, hard volcanic bedrock was once again exposed to the light of day. The treasure chest had been unearthed, but the glacier wasn't finished. It didn't just expose the copper-bearing rock, it began to quarry it. At the base of the moving ice, immense pressure could cause some of the meltwater to seep into the cracks of the bedrock below. When this water refroze, it expanded with incredible force, a process called frost wedging, breaking the rock apart. The slow, relentless grinding of the ice sheet then plucked these shattered pieces, big and small, from the ground and incorporated them into its frozen body. It was a conveyor belt of unimaginable size and power. And when the ice tore at the exposed veins of the mid-continent rift, it did not distinguish between rock and metal. It ripped away the basalt, and with it, it tore away the seams of pure native copper that had been locked inside for 1 billion years. Chunks of the metal, from little nuggets the size of your thumb to massive boulders weighing many tons, were pulled from the earth and began a slow journey south, carried in the belly of the ice. This material is what you know as float copper. It's called that because it seems to float in a landscape of rock and soil where it doesn't geologically belong. Glaciologists still model the complex flows and retreats of the various lobes of the ice sheet, but the general path is clear. The ice acted as a great, indiscriminate transport system, picking up its metallic cargo in the Keweenaw Peninsula and Isle Royale and scattering it far and wide. Then, around 12,000 years ago, the final retreat began. The climate warmed, and the great ice sheet began to stagnate and melt, releasing its hold on the land and its billion years of stolen goods. As the ice melted away, everything it had been carrying was simply dropped in place. Vast fields of boulders, ridges of gravel, and a thick layer of till, a mix of sand, clay, and rock, were deposited over the scoured bedrock. And mixed in with all of this geological debris, like jewels scattered in the dirt, were the pieces of float copper. They lay on the surface of the newly born ground. They were tumbled and concentrated in the beds of the powerful meltwater rivers. They were pushed up onto the shorelines of the new glacial lakes. The most powerful geological force on Earth had acted as the perfect mining and delivery service. It had unlocked the ancient vault and laid its contents bare, right at the feet of the first people to walk into this new world. Thousands of years have passed since your ancestor first struck that glimmering green stone on a lonely shore and discovered its secret. The world has changed. The great ice wall to the north is gone, a distant memory preserved only in the oldest of stories. The raw, wind-swept tundra has been replaced by a world of overwhelming life. Vast, mature forests of pine, oak, and maple now blanket the land, their canopy so thick that the forest floor is in a permanent state of twilight. The milky, rock-flowered lakes have settled, and their waters are now crystal clear, teeming with pike, sturgeon, and trout. The herds of mammoth and mastodon have vanished, but in their place are abundant white-tailed deer, elk, black bear, and moose. This is the world of the archaic peoples, a world of rich, stable abundance. And you are a part of it. Your connection to the land is absolute. You move with the seasons, from the maple sugar camps in the early spring to the fishing sites in the summer, to the wild rice beds in the autumn, and finally to the sheltered valleys for the deep winter. And as you move, your eyes are always open, always reading the landscape. You know which plants are medicine, which berries are sweet, and which mushrooms will feed you. You know the habits of every animal, and you also know about the heavy, gleaming stone. The knowledge of copper is no longer a shocking revelation. It is a part of your culture, a practical and sacred wisdom passed down from grandparent to grandchild. You know what it looks like, where to find it, and what it can do. Archaeologists still debate whether the knowledge of copper working spread from a single origin point, or was discovered and developed independently by different groups around the Great Lakes as they encountered the strange new material. But for you, the knowledge is simply a part of your inheritance. Finding float copper has become an integrated part of your seasonal round. When you are walking along a riverbed, your eyes are trained to look for that telltale greenish stain on a rock or the metallic glint in the water. After a powerful storm, you know to check the roots of an upturned tree, as the soil might have surrendered a nugget. It is a resource that is simply there, a gift from the land for those with the knowledge to see it. It is not mined from the earth, not yet. It is found. When you find a good piece, you bring it back to camp. The process of working it is one of patient, repeated effort. You have a set of favorite hammerstones, worn smooth from use, and a heavy, flat-topped boulder that serves as your anvil. You begin the slow work of hammering the nugget, not to break it, but to coax it into a new form. The sound of copper working is now a familiar one in your village, a rhythmic tink-tink-tink that is different from the sharp crack of someone knapping flint. You learn the metal's personality. You learn that as you hammer it, it gets stubborn and hard, and if you push it too far, it can develop small cracks. You learn that if you put it in the fire for a while and let it get hot, it becomes soft and agreeable again, its internal tensions eased. Your first creations are small, practical things, tools that solve the nagging problems of your old toolkit. You hammer a small, flat nugget into a long, thin point. You sharpen it on a piece of sandstone. It's an awl. With it, you can punch perfect, clean holes in thick moose hide for sewing a winter cloak, a task that was always a struggle with a brittle bone awl that could snap at any moment. You take another piece and painstakingly flatten and bend it, forming it into the beat curve of a fishhook. It is an object of simple, profound beauty, and its durability means you can catch the powerful deep-water fish that would have broken a hook carved from bone. Perhaps you make a small, sharp-edged crescent, a little knife perfect for the delicate work of skinning a beaver or gutting a fish. Some of the earliest pieces found by archaeologists even have what appear to be human tooth marks on them, a quirky piece of evidence suggesting that people would bite the raw metal, perhaps to test its softness and malleability. These small tools are a quiet revolution. They don't replace your stone spearheads or your wooden bows, but they supplement them, filling in the gaps where the old materials fell short. Each success, each new tool that works, reinforces the knowledge. Each failure, each cracked and ruined piece, teaches a lesson. Over generations, this slow accumulation of knowledge is building. The first tentative taps on a strange rock are becoming a true technology, a craft, an art form. You and your people are on the cusp of something much, much bigger. The land is still strewn with the easy pickings of float copper, but the demand for this wondrous material is growing, and soon you will have to go to the source. Now, let the centuries blur and dissolve. The quiet, forested world of the archaic hunter fades to black. The rhythmic tapping of stone on copper is silenced. Thousands of years pass in a breath. When the world fades back in, it is to a cacophony of new sounds. The clang of steel on steel, the sharp crack of black powder explosions, the shouts of men, and the groan of wagon wheels. The year is 1843. You are standing on the same land, but it is a different universe. This is Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula, and you are here for the copper rush. You're a miner, maybe from the tin mines of Cornwall, maybe from the coal pits of Ireland. You're a professional, an expert in hard rock, brought here for your knowledge. You understand geology, you know how to read the rock for signs of a lode, and you know how to use the modern miracles of steel drill bits and explosive black powder to get it out. The air is thick with the promise of wealth. News of the region's incredible copper purity has spread like wildfire, fueled by stories of things like the Ontonagon boulder. For generations, this multi-ton behemoth of pure float copper sat in a riverbed, a sacred site for the local Anishinaabe people. But to the American government and the prospectors, it was a symbol, a massive, tangible advertisement for the riches that lay waiting. It was dragged out of the wilderness, put on a ship, and became a national sensation, helping to kickstart the very rush you've now joined. As you and your crew begin prospecting, pushing through the dense, mosquito-infested forests, you find something strange. The ground is not untouched. It's pitted and scarred with ancient-looking depressions, shallow trenches, and overgrown heaps of rock that are clearly not natural formations. They are everywhere. At first, you and the other miners don't think much of it. The old Frenchmen were here, is the common wisdom. You imagine voyageurs and Jesuit priests from a century or two ago dabbling in a bit of amateur prospecting. It's a curiosity, nothing more. In fact, you see these pits as a good sign, a hint that you're in the right area. One particularly large, tree-filled depression looks promising, so your crew decides to reopen it, hoping the old-timers did the hard work of finding the vein for you. You start digging. You clear the trees and the centuries of accumulated leaf litter and soil. The pit is deeper than you thought. You keep digging. 10 feet. 15 feet. The rock walls are steep and solid. This wasn't the work of a few guys with shovels. This took serious effort. And then you start finding the tools. At the bottom of the pit, mixed in with the rock debris, are hundreds, no, thousands, of rounded, grooved stones. They are clearly hammerheads, worn and battered from heavy use, their distinctive grooves carved so they could be tied with a handle. There isn't a single scrap of metal among them. No broken steel pickaxes, no rusted shovel blades, just stone. Thousands upon thousands of stone hammers. A deep sense of confusion begins to settle over you and your crew. This wasn't the work of French explorers. They had iron. This was something else, something far older. And the scale is what truly shakes you. The pit bottoms out at nearly 30 feet deep, a massive shaft cut into the notoriously tough basaltic rock. You, with your steel and your explosives, look at this ancient pit, and you have to admit, this would have been a difficult, expensive, and time-consuming job, even for you. How was it done with nothing but stone hammers? Some of the deeper pits, once pumped free of water, are found to have the remains of notched log ladders and wooden shoring still preserved in the oxygen-free muck at the bottom. The evidence is irrefutable. This was a sophisticated, large-scale mining operation. The mystery deepens. Who were these ancient miners? Early speculators and antiquarians, looking at this evidence, proposed all sorts of fantastical theories, unable or unwilling to accept that the ancestors of the local indigenous people could be responsible for such an industrial marvel. They talked of a lost race of Vikings, or Welshmen, or the mythical mound builders. The truth, that a Stone Age culture had orchestrated an industrial-scale mining operation that rivaled or even exceeded your own, was simply too much to comprehend. You came here feeling like a master of the earth, a pinnacle of modern technology. But as you stand at the edge of this impossible pit, holding a smooth, heavy stone hammer in your hand, you feel a profound sense of humility and awe. You are not the first, and you are left with a question that will echo for the next 2 centuries. Who on earth were they? The mystery you uncovered in the pits of the Keweenaw Peninsula is only the beginning. The true, staggering scale of this ancient industry is found on a lonely, fog-shrouded island 45 miles out in the treacherous, icy waters of Lake Superior. Today we call it Isle Royale. It is a rugged, wind-swept place of rock ridges and dense forest, a fortress of wilderness surrounded by the most dangerous of the Great Lakes. For you, the 19th century miner, it is the edge of the world. Getting there requires a perilous journey in a steamship, a journey that many smaller vessels don't survive. Yet, as prospectors begin to explore this remote outpost, the reports that filter back to the mainland are scarcely believable. The island, they say, is not just touched by the ancient miners, it is utterly transformed by them. From one end of the 45-mile-long island to the other, the ground is covered in prehistoric pits. They are not scattered here and there, they are a dominant feature of the landscape. Along the Minong Ridge, the pits are so dense they form a nearly continuous, overlapping line of earthworks stretching for miles. Modern archaeological surveys have confirmed the astonishing numbers. There are well over 5,000 individual prehistoric copper pits on Isle Royale alone. It is, for all intents and purposes, a preserved industrial landscape, a silent, sprawling monument to a forgotten age of titans. The sheer scale of the labor is what breaks the 19th century mind. Engineers and mining experts of your era begin to do the calculations, and the results are mind-boggling. Based on the size and number of pits and the richness of the veins they were following, conservative estimates suggest that at least 500 million pounds of pure copper were extracted from Isle Royale in prehistoric times. Some estimates run as high as 1.5 billion pounds. The amount of rock that had to be moved, the sheer tonnage of overburden and basalt that had to be shattered and hauled out of these pits with nothing but stone tools and human muscle, is almost beyond calculation. It would have been one of the most significant mining operations on planet Earth at the time, larger and more extensive than any single contemporary mine in Europe or America. This is the evidence that shatters the romantic notion of a few families casually picking up nuggets of float copper. This was not opportunism. This was an industry. An operation on this scale required a level of social organization that, according to the scientific theories of your time, simply should not have existed. Think of the logistics. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people would have had to make the dangerous canoe journey across Lake Superior every summer. A whole support system would be needed. People to fish and hunt to feed the miners. People to make and repair the stone tools that were being constantly worn down and broken. People to manage the camps and the processing of the extracted copper. This implies food surpluses, a division of labor, and a level of planning and coordination that spans not just a season, but generations. This brings us to the central enigma, the great scholarly debate that still rages today. How could a pre-agricultural society of hunter-gatherers, supposedly living in small, mobile, egalitarian bands, organize and sustain such a massive, labor-intensive undertaking? The classic anthropological model dictates that large-scale public works and industrial specialization are the hallmarks of settled agricultural societies with hierarchical leadership, chiefs or kings who can command a large labor force. Yet here is the undeniable evidence of an industrial-scale enterprise conducted by a people who, as far as we know, did not have farming, did not live in permanent cities, and did not have a recognized ruling class. The pits of Isle Royale present a direct challenge to the neat and tidy stages of human social evolution. This wasn't supposed to happen. Hunter-gatherers weren't supposed to be able to do this. Yet the evidence is there, carved into the ancient rock of a remote island, a silent testament to a people who broke all the rules. For a century after their rediscovery, the ancient mines remained a profound but frustrating mystery. The evidence of a massive, sophisticated operation was undeniable, but a crucial question lingered. Just how old was it? The stone hammers couldn't be dated. The overgrown pits themselves offered few clues. And the central problem, the one that stumped generations of archaeologists, is that you cannot radiocarbon date metal. Carbon dating works by measuring the decay of carbon-14 in organic materials, things that were once alive. A lump of pure, inorganic copper has no such clock. The artifacts were timeless, floating in a historical void, disconnected from a clear point of origin. Were they 500 years old? 1,000? 3,000? For a long time, no one knew for sure. The answer would have to wait for the arrival of new scientific techniques, for minds creative enough to look for evidence not in the pits themselves, but in the environment around them. The breakthrough came not from an archaeologist with a shovel, but from a geoscientist with a long, hollow tube. The key was to understand that every major human activity leaves a footprint, a signature, on the landscape. And the most pristine historical archives on the planet are often found at the bottom of quiet, undisturbed lakes. Imagine you are in a boat on a small lake, a few miles from the ancient mining ridges. You lower a weighted coring device deep into the water until it plunges into the soft mud of the lake bed. For thousands of years, season after season, a fine rain of sediment has been settling here. Dust and pollen on the wind, silt from inflowing streams, the remains of microscopic organisms. This sediment builds up in incredibly fine, distinct annual layers, or varves, much like tree rings. By carefully extracting a long vertical core of this mud, you can pull up a perfectly preserved timeline of the local environment, a history book written in pollen and silt. This is the science of Paleolimnology. The brilliant idea, pursued by researchers like David Pompey, was to look for the signature of pollution. Think about the process of making a copper tool in a camp near the lake. You are sitting by a fire, hammering a piece of raw copper on a stone anvil. Every single strike sends a small cloud of microscopic particles into the air. Tiny fragments of copper and even tiny, perfect spheres of metal that were melted for a microsecond by the heat of the impact are thrown into the atmosphere. This fine metallic dust is then carried by the wind, and some of it inevitably settles on the surface of the nearby lake, sinking into the mud and becoming a permanent part of the geological record. Back in the lab, you begin the painstaking process of analyzing the core. You slice it into razor-thin sections, each representing a few years of time. You examine them under a powerful microscope. You move backwards in time, going deeper and deeper into the core, 500 years ago, 1,000, 3,000, 5,000. The layers are clean, containing only natural materials. And then, at a depth corresponding to 9,500 years before the present, everything changes. Suddenly, the slide is filled with those telltale copper spherules. The pollution appears. This is the smoking gun. This is the irrefutable microscopic evidence of the very beginning of the mining activity. It is the oldest record of metalworking pollution found anywhere on Earth, predating similar evidence in Europe and the Middle East by thousands of years. This indirect evidence was then confirmed by a more direct method. Copper, it turns out, is a potent biocide. The salts that form on its surface as it patinates are toxic to bacteria and fungi, the organisms that cause decay. Occasionally, archaeologists find a copper spear point or axe head that still has organic material preserved inside its socket. A fragment of the wooden shaft, a bit of the sinew wrapping, or the leather cord that held it fast. Protected from decomposition by the copper salts, this ancient organic material can be accurately dated using carbon-14. The results are stunning. The oldest of these preserved materials date back to at least 8,500 years ago, proving that not only were people mining the copper, they were already manufacturing it into complex, socketed tools. The science had finally spoken, shattering old timelines and proving that this American mystery was far older and more significant than anyone had ever dreamed. The dates are now fixed, the timeline secured by the irrefutable evidence of science. But numbers on a chart can feel cold and distant. To truly understand this story, we have to step away from the modern laboratory and the 19th century mines and walk back into the deep woods of the past. Let's return to that time, around 7,000 years ago, a vibrant peak in the long history of the old copper culture. Let's step back into the life you would have lived. Your world is a symphony of green and blue. The last vestiges of the harsh, post-glacial climate are long gone. You live within an immense, continuous forest, a rich and varied ecosystem that provides everything you need. On the high ground, vast stands of white pine, some of them hundreds of feet tall, form a cathedral-like canopy. In the valleys and lowlands, it's a dense mixture of hardwoods like oak, maple, and birch, interwoven with hemlock and cedar. The forest floor is a thick carpet of moss and decaying leaves, muffling your footsteps as you hunt. This is a hunter's paradise, and its bounty is the foundation of your existence. Your diet is incredibly rich and varied, a testament to your people's deep knowledge of the land. You hunt the abundant white-tailed deer, the much larger elk, and the formidable black bear, whose fat is as valuable as its meat. The rivers and lakes are your other larder. The sheer quantity and size of the fish are hard to imagine today. You spear massive, dinosaur-like sturgeon in the spring spawning runs, set nets for pike and walleye, and catch trout in the clear, cold streams. The plants of the forest also sustain you. You gather hickory nuts and acorns in the fall, harvesting them in huge quantities to be processed and stored for the winter. You pick wild berries in the summer and harvest wild rice from the shallow lakes in the autumn. Your people are not just surviving in this world. You are thriving, living in a state of profound abundance. Your society is built around the family. You live and travel in a small, tight-knit group of maybe 20 to 30 people. Your parents, your siblings, your cousins, your aunts and uncles. This extended family is your entire social world. There are no kings, no chiefs, no priests who stand above anyone else. Decisions are made through consensus, and leadership is temporary, based on skill and experience. An older woman might lead the gathering of medicinal plants, while a particularly skilled hunter might lead the pursuit of game. The greatest puzzle for archaeologists is reconciling this picture of a mobile, non-hierarchical society with the intense, organized labor demanded by the copper mines. You are a people on the move, but your movements are not random wanderings. You follow a well-established seasonal round, a circuit that you and your ancestors have walked for generations. In the spring, you might camp near a river mouth to take advantage of the fish runs. In the summer, you might move to a berry patch or a good fishing lake. In the fall, it's the nut groves and the wild rice beds. Your home, therefore, is not a permanent structure. You live in elegant, efficient, and portable dwellings known as wigwams. You create the frame by driving long, flexible saplings into the ground, bending and lashing them together at the top to form a dome. This frame is then covered with overlapping sheets of birch bark or woven cattail mats. A fire in a central hearth keeps the home warm and smoky enough to drive away the clouds of summer mosquitoes, and a hole in the roof lets the smoke out. When it's time to move, you can simply roll up the bark or mat coverings and leave the frame behind, ready for your return next season. This mobile lifestyle is the heart of the paradox. You live in a way that is light upon the land, in homes that are temporary. And yet your people are responsible for the thousands of deep, permanent scars in the earth at the copper mines. You are undertaking monumental stationary engineering projects that require a commitment to a single place for months at a time. This suggests that for part of the year, your small family band would gather with many others, forming a temporary super community dedicated to the difficult, dangerous, and sacred work of releasing the shimmering red metal from the ancient rock. To understand how your people could organize such massive undertakings, how you could commit to such difficult and dangerous work, you have to understand the way you see the world. And your world is nothing like the one we know today. For you, there is no division between the physical and the spiritual, between the mundane and the sacred. The world is not a collection of inert objects and resources for you to use. It is a living, breathing community of beings, and you are just one member of that community. This is an animistic worldview, and it is the lens through which you experience all of reality. Everything has a spirit. Everything is alive and has agency. The bear you hunt is not just a slab of meat. It is a powerful being, and when you take its life, you must do so with respect, with prayer, and with an offering, thanking its spirit for giving itself to you. The cedar tree you strip for its bark is an ancient and wise person, and you must ask its permission before you take its skin. The very stones you use to make your tools have a spirit, a life force, that you must understand to work with them properly. Your success, your health, your very survival depends on maintaining a delicate balance of reciprocal relationships with all these other than human persons who share the world with you. Some places and some beings are more powerful than others. The world for you is layered. There is the world you walk on, the sky world above, and the world beneath the earth and the water. This underworld is a place of immense power, a source of creation, danger, and great wealth. And the spirits that inhabit this underwater realm are some of the most powerful and feared of all. While your specific name for this being is lost to time, the peoples who inherited your lands, the Anishinaabe, speak of a mighty and terrifying spirit who rules this domain. They call him Mishipeshu, the Great Lynx. He is a creature of immense power, the guardian of the underwater world. He is described as having the body of a giant cougar or lynx, the horns of a deer or bison, a crested spine of sharp quills, and a long serpentine tail made of copper. His eyes glow like coals in the deep water. Mishipeshu is the master of all the fish. He can cause sudden, violent storms on the Great Lakes, his lashing tail creating treacherous waves that can swallow a canoe without warning. He is a source of great healing and power for those who know how to approach him with respect, but he is a source of death for the arrogant and the greedy. And Mishipeshu, the great horned panther, is the ultimate guardian of copper. The metal you seek is not just a material, it is a physical manifestation of his power. The gleaming red nuggets are scales from his tail, or fragments of his horns, or the solidified blood from his wounds. It is a sacred substance, imbued with the life force of one of the most powerful spirits in the cosmos. This changes everything. Mining is no longer a simple act of resource extraction. It is a profound, terrifying, and spiritually charged quest. To venture out onto the great water, Lake Superior, is to enter his home, his territory. To dig into the earth on an island like Isle Royale is to cut into his flesh. Taking the copper is not just work, it is a form of theft from a god. While direct evidence of your specific rituals is lost to time, archaeologists and ethnohistorians widely agree that a powerful spiritual belief system must have been in place. Every mining expedition would have been steeped in ceremony. You would have made offerings, fasted and prayed, asking for permission and protection. The work would be carried out not just with sweat, but with a constant awareness of the immense spiritual power you were dealing with. This belief is what fuels your courage. It explains why you would risk your life in a canoe on a stormy lake and toil for months in a deep, dark pit. You are not just seeking a better material for a fishhook. You are seeking to bring a piece of a god's power back to your people. The spiritual motivation is the fire in your belly, the courage that allows you to face the great lynx in his watery home. But courage alone doesn't break rock. The logistics of this operation, fitting a massive industrial effort into your mobile way of life, requires a different kind of genius, a genius for social organization. The central paradox remains. Your family group is small and constantly on the move, but the mines are stationary and demand the labor of hundreds. The solution, the only one that makes sense, is that mining is a seasonal pulse, a temporary but immense change in the rhythm of your year. For most of the year, you follow your traditional seasonal round, but as the snows melt and the days grow long and warm, a different kind of energy begins to stir among the scattered family bands. Word is passed from group to group. It is time. It is time to go to the mountain of copper. The expedition to a place like Isle Royale would have been the major event of the summer, a focal point for the entire year. You don't travel as a single family, but as part of a flotilla. Multiple family groups gather at a rendezvous point on the mainland, preparing for the dangerous journey. The trip itself is a huge undertaking. You load your great dugout canoes, carved from a single massive pine tree, with everything you'll need for a few months: hide blankets, clay pots, baskets of stored food, and most importantly, your children and your dogs. You wait for a calm day, for the right weather, and then you push off, paddling across the vast, cold, and unpredictable expanse of Lake Superior. When you arrive at the island, it is transformed. For most of the year, it is a silent, lonely place. But for these few months, it becomes a bustling hub of activity, a temporary city of wigwams nestled in the sheltered bays. Hundreds of people from all over the region are here, people you might only see during this annual gathering. The air is thick with the smoke of countless campfires and the din of human activity. It is a time of intense social energy. Old friendships are renewed. Young people from different bands meet, fall in love, and form new families. It is a time for trade, a chance to exchange the fine chert from your home territory for the skillfully made baskets of another family. Elders share stories and knowledge, and important ceremonies are performed to ensure the success and safety of the mining. But at the heart of it all is the work. Every day, crews of people head out from the camps to the ridges where the copper is found. The labor is brutally hard, a relentless cycle of heating the rock with fire, shattering it with water, and pounding it with heavy stone hammers. This is where historians still argue about the details of the organization. Was the mining done by a specialized group, a kind of miners' guild of strong men who were trained for the task, while everyone else performed support roles like hunting, fishing, and preparing food? Or was it a more communal effort, where everyone who was able pitched in? Perhaps the men did the heavy smashing, while women and older children helped haul the broken rock out of the pits in baskets. The sheer quantity of broken hammerstones found at these sites is a testament to the constant need for tool replacement, meaning that groups of people must have been dedicated simply to finding suitable new cobbles and shaping them into functional hammerheads. Whatever the specific organization, the result was a flood of raw copper moving from the pits back to the camps. In the evenings, the work would shift. The rhythmic, heavy thump of the mining pits would be replaced by the sharper tink, tink, tink of the artisans, the men and women who had the skill to begin shaping the raw metal, hammering it into rough forms that could be more easily transported. You might spend all day hauling rock, and then spend the evening by the fire, slowly working a small piece of copper into the shape of a new awl for your wife. It is a time of immense effort and incredible productivity, a period when your people come together to do something that no single family could ever hope to accomplish alone, strengthening the social and spiritual bonds that hold your world together. The great seasonal gathering on Isle Royale represents the peak of your people's industrial power, the most complex and labor-intensive expression of your quest for copper. But not all mining was done on such a grand scale. For every deep and dangerous pit, there were 100 smaller, simpler acts of extraction happening all over the region. The knowledge of copper was widespread, and the methods for getting it ranged from the simple act of picking it up off the ground to the brute force work of attacking the exposed rock itself. These were the earliest methods, the techniques that laid the foundation for the entire industry. The first and simplest method was the one your ancestors discovered thousands of years ago, collecting float copper. This was the metal that the glaciers had already mined for you, a vast treasure scattered across the landscape. Finding it was not a matter of dumb luck. It was a science of observation, a skill passed down through generations. You know how to read the land. You know the stories of the great ice sheet, and you know the direction it flowed. Therefore, you know to search in the gravel ridges and stream beds that lie downstream from the places where the copper is known to live in the bedrock, like the Keweenaw Peninsula. You have a prospector's eye. You can spot the telltale green stain of copper carbonate on a stone from 50 paces away. You know that after the spring floods, a walk along the riverbank might reveal a new nugget scoured from the mud by the powerful current. This kind of extraction is low risk and high reward. A single afternoon's walk can sometimes yield several pounds of pure, workable metal with no more effort than bending over to pick it up. For thousands of years, this was likely the primary source of copper for your people. It fueled the early innovations and the slow spread of copper tools. But there is a fundamental problem with this method. It's finite. The supply is not being replenished. Every piece you pick up is one less piece that can ever be found. Over the centuries, the easy pickings get harder to find. The large, obvious nuggets on the surface have all been collected by your ancestors. The demand for copper, however, is not shrinking. It is growing. And so, you must turn to a more direct approach. The next step up in difficulty is to attack the source itself, where veins of copper are naturally exposed to the air. You might find a cliff face sheared off by the glacier, or a rocky outcrop on a hillside, where a thick, reddish-brown seam of pure metal is visible, running through the dark basalt. This is a monolith of copper, held fast in the embrace of the rock. It will not be taken easily. This is not a job for one person, but for a small team. The technique is one of pure brute force. You come armed with your heaviest hammerstones, specially selected cobbles of dense, tough granite weighing 20 or 30 pounds. You find a purchase, a spot where a small bit of the copper vein juts out from the rock, and you begin to hammer it. The work is grueling. The sound is a deafening metallic clang that echoes through the forest. You work in shifts, one person hammering until their arms are numb with exhaustion, then another takes over. You are not trying to break the copper. You are trying to break the rock around it. You are trying to exploit the fact that the basalt is brittle, while the copper is malleable. Slowly, painstakingly, you might manage to deform the edge of the copper vein, bending it back and forth, stressing the surrounding rock until it cracks and you can pry a chunk of metal free. Sometimes the veins are so massive and so tightly bound that you can only manage to knock off the smaller, protruding bits, leaving the main body scarred with a constellation of impact marks, a visible testament to your immense but often futile efforts. Archaeologists generally agree that this kind of surface quarrying, along with the collection of float copper, represented the earliest phase of the industry, a long period of learning that set the stage for a much more ambitious and ingenious solution. The easy pickings can't last forever. As the generations pass, the float copper becomes a rare and lucky find, and the exposed surface veins have been chipped away or have proven too stubborn for brute force alone. To get at the real wealth, the great veins of copper that run deep into the earth, you need more than just muscle. You need a way to fight the rock itself, to turn its own strength against it. You need a cleverer, more powerful technique. And your people, through generations of observation and experimentation, have discovered one. It is a masterful application of natural forces, a form of geological alchemy that combines fire, water, and stone. This is the technique that allowed you to dig the great pits, to follow a vein 30 feet down into the planet's crust. It begins with fire. You and your crew identify a promising spot, a section of bedrock where the telltale signs of a copper lode are visible. Your first task is to gather an enormous amount of fuel. This isn't a small campfire. You need to generate an intense, sustained heat. For days you collect dead, dry hardwood, hauling it to the rock face until you have a massive pyre, piled high against the spot you intend to break. Then you set it ablaze. The fire roars to life, and your job becomes one of feeding the beast, pushing more logs into the heart of the blaze, keeping it concentrated on the rock. For hours you tend the fire, the heat so intense you have to shield your face. The goal is to get the basaltic rock superheated, to raise its temperature until it is glowing a dull red in the shadows. While the fire rages, the second part of the operation is underway. Buckets made of strong birch bark, sealed with pine pitch, are used to haul water from a nearby stream or the lake itself. A long line of people, a human chain, might be formed to pass the buckets up to the mining site, where the water is collected in a large vessel, perhaps a hollowed-out log or a clay-lined basin. It is a coordinated, communal effort. Then comes the critical moment. The rock is glowing. The fire has done its work. With long poles, you and your crew frantically pull the burning logs and embers away from the rock face, exposing the superheated stone to the cool air. Immediately, the designated water carriers rush forward and heave the cold water directly onto the glowing surface. The effect is instantaneous and violent. A massive cloud of hissing steam erupts, so thick you can't see through it. The air is filled with a cacophony of sharp, cracking sounds, like a tree limb snapping in the winter frost, but amplified 100 times. This is the magic, the scientific principle you have harnessed. Thermal shock. The outer surface of the superheated rock, when hit with cold water, contracts violently, while the rock deeper inside remains expanded. This immense stress is more than the stone can bear. It shatters, cracks, and spalls, its internal structure compromised. Now, the final stage begins. The rock, once impossibly hard, is now brittle and fractured. You and the strongest members of your crew move in with the heavy mauls. These are not the smaller hammerstones used for shaping metal. These are giant, grooved sledgehammers of solid granite, some weighing more than 60 pounds. 2 people might heft one together, swinging it like a battering ram to smash away the shattered rock. Others use smaller, single-handed hammers to work on the more fractured areas. The work is still incredibly hard, but it is now possible. You are no longer fighting the full strength of the bedrock, but merely cleaning up the debris of your thermal assault. Modern engineers who have studied this technique are consistently impressed by its efficiency. It is a testament to your people's sophisticated, empirical understanding of material science. You pound and pry, and slowly the weakened basalt falls away, revealing the prize that was locked inside. The tough, gleaming reddish-gold vein of pure copper. The fire has cracked the rock, but the copper is not yet free. It is buried in a chaotic jumble of fractured, sharp-edged basalt. Your work has now shifted from the dramatic application of thermal shock to the long, grueling task of clearing this debris. To do this, you and your people have developed a simple, yet highly effective toolkit. Each tool is an elegant solution to a specific problem, crafted from the materials of the forest and the shoreline. This is the technology that makes the great pits possible. The undisputed king of your mining toolkit is the hammerstone. Tens of thousands of them have been found in and around the ancient pits, a silent army of discarded tools. They are the most common artifact of your entire culture. You don't just pick up any random rock. You are selective, choosing dense, tough beach cobbles of granite or basalt, stones that can deliver a powerful blow without shattering themselves. They range in size from small, fist-sized hammers for one-handed work to the giant two-person mauls we've already seen. But their most distinctive feature is the groove. You painstakingly carve or peck a shallow groove around the middle of the hammerstone. This groove is a simple but brilliant piece of engineering designed to securely attach a handle. The handle itself is a clever invention. You take a green, flexible sapling of hickory or ash and bend it 180 degrees around the groove. You then lash the two ends together with rawhide or sinew. As the green wood of this handle dries, it shrinks, tightening its grip on the grooved hammerstone until it is incredibly secure. This design not only provides leverage for a powerful swing, but the wood also acts as a natural shock absorber, saving your hands and arms from the jarring impact of striking solid rock for hours on end. You use these hammers for everything, smashing the fractured rock, pounding on the copper veins, and shaping other tools. They are the universal power tool of your era. Of course, breaking the rock is only half the battle. You then have to get it out of the pit. For this, you use wooden shovels. These are rare finds for archaeologists, preserved only when they are lost or discarded in a waterlogged pit where the lack of oxygen prevents decay. But when they are found, they are beautiful in their simplicity, often carved from a single piece of wood, with a wide, flat blade and a sturdy handle, perfectly designed for scooping and moving loose rock. For the more detailed work of prying out stubborn chunks of rock or clearing crevices, you use picks made from the tines of a moose or elk antler. The antler is softer than stone, but incredibly tough and resilient, making it the perfect tool for working in tight spaces without shattering. And as you dig deeper, you constantly have to fight against water. The pits, being dug below the water table, are always trying to fill up. To combat this, you have an endless bucket brigade, using simple but effective balers made from large sheets of birch bark, folded into a waterproof container and sealed with pine pitch. It's a constant, wearying task, but without it, the lower reaches of the mine would be inaccessible. It is a full system of tools, an assembly line of coordinated effort. One team manages the fire, another shatters the rock. A third crew shovels the debris into baskets to be hauled out of the pit. A fourth is on constant water bailing duty. It is a picture of remarkable efficiency, a Stone Age system designed to acquire a Metal Age resource, all powered by human ingenuity and the simple, elegant tools you craft from the world around you. You have won the battle with the rock. The copper is free. You carry the raw, heavy chunks back to your camp by the lake. The air here is free from the dust and smoke of the pit. The chaotic, brutal noise of mining gives way to the more rhythmic and refined sounds of the workshop. Your forge is not a building with a great hearth and bellows. It is a space defined by a large, flat-topped boulder that serves as your anvil, and a carefully selected collection of smooth, dense hammerstones that are your most prized possessions. The time for breaking things is over. Now begins the art of creation. You select a jagged piece of copper, its surface a dull, earthy brown, but with a telltale gleam where it was torn from the vein. It's heavy in your hand, a lump of pure potential. The first step is to bring some order to its chaotic shape, to turn it into a workable preform, what a modern smith would call a billet. You place it on your stone anvil and begin to strike it with one of your favorite hammerstones. The blows are not the wild, full-force swings you used in the mine. They are controlled, deliberate, and rhythmic. Thump, thump, thump. Each blow leaves a small, shining facet on the copper's surface. With each strike, you are coaxing the metal, persuading it to move, to flatten, to take on the rough shape you have pictured in your mind. This is cold hammering, the absolute foundation of your entire metallurgical tradition. At first, the metal is agreeable, almost soft. It yields under the hammer, spreading out, thinning, responding to your will. It feels alive in a way that stone never does. You can feel the shock of the impact travel through the metal, a dull, satisfying thud. But as you continue to work, a strange and subtle transformation begins to take place. The metal starts to fight back. The spot you are hammering becomes less yielding, harder. The dull thud of the hammerstone begins to change to a higher-pitched, more musical tink. The copper, which was once your compliant partner, is becoming stubborn. You are experiencing a fundamental law of metallurgy, a property called work hardening. As you hammer the copper, you aren't just changing its shape, you are changing its internal structure. On a microscopic level, you are battering and deforming the elegant, orderly crystal lattice of the metal. You are creating countless tiny dislocations, tangling them up, and compressing them until they can no longer move easily past one another. The result is that the copper becomes significantly harder and stronger, but it pays a terrible price for this newfound strength. It becomes brittle. This is a lesson that would have been learned the hard way. Archaeologists can only imagine the generations of trial and error it must have taken to master this property, the countless cracked and ruined pieces that served as lessons. You, however, have inherited this knowledge. You can feel the change in the metal under your hammer. You can hear it in the rising pitch of the impacts. You know that if you ignore these signs, if you keep trying to force the hardened, stubborn metal to bend to your will, it will fail. Microscopic fractures will form and race through the structure, and with one final frustrated blow, the piece you have spent hours working on will crack, ruined. The spirit of the metal, it seems, has been angered. To continue your work, you cannot rely on brute force. You must now turn again to the spirit of the fire, not for its destructive power, but for its magic to heal and soften. The metal has grown stubborn in your hands, its spirit hardened by the trauma of the hammer. You have reached the limit of what force can accomplish. Now you must turn to a different kind of magic, a partnership with the fire. This is the secret that unlocks the full potential of copper, the discovery that elevates your craft from simple bashing to a true and sophisticated metallurgy. The solution to hardness is not more force, but heat. This is the process of annealing. You move from your stone anvil to your campfire hearth. The fire is burning steadily, a bed of glowing orange coals at its heart. With a pair of greenwood tongs, you carefully take your work-hardened piece of copper and place it directly into the hottest part of the fire. The goal here is not to melt the metal. That would require a far hotter and more specialized furnace, a temperature you could never reach in a simple open fire. Copper's melting point is nearly 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. No, you are aiming for something much subtler. You are simply heating the copper, letting it soak in the warmth of the coals, watching it carefully. After a few minutes, it begins to glow. First a deep, barely visible cherry red, then a little brighter. This is the sign you are looking for. You have reached the annealing temperature, somewhere around 700 or 800 degrees. What happens next is a kind of miracle on a microscopic level. The heat you have applied is a form of energy. This energy flows into the metal, causing the tightly packed copper atoms to vibrate with incredible intensity. This vibration is just enough to allow the atoms in the stressed, tangled, and hardened crystal structure to break their bonds, move, and rearrange themselves. The tangled mess of dislocations you created with your hammer is untangled. The internal stresses are relieved. The atoms settle back into their original neat and orderly crystalline rows. The scientific term is recrystallization, but for you, it is simply the spirit of the metal being soothed, its anger calmed by the warmth of the fire. Once the metal has soaked in the heat for a few minutes, You use your tongs to pull the glowing piece from the coals. Metallurgists today debate whether you would have plunged it into a bucket of water with a great hiss of steam, or simply set it on a rock to cool in the open air. For steel, this choice is critical. A rapid quench makes it hard. But for pure copper, the cooling rate makes very little difference. Once it has cooled to a temperature you can handle, you pick it up. It is transformed. The stubborn, brittle quality is gone. It feels soft and malleable again, ready to be worked. It is healed. This is the cycle that lies at the heart of your craft. It is a slow, patient, and methodical dance with the metal. You hammer the soft copper, shaping it, and in the process it becomes hard. You then heat the hard copper, and it becomes soft again. Hammer, harden, heat, soften, repeat, over and over. Each cycle of hammering allows you to refine the shape a little more. Each cycle of annealing allows you to continue the work without destroying the piece. This controlled, deliberate manipulation of the metal's properties is the very definition of metallurgy. It is a profound understanding of a material learned through generations of close observation. With this cycle, you can gradually coax a thick copper nugget into a paper-thin sheet, or draw it out into a long, thin wire, or form it into the complex, hollow socket of a spearhead. Shapes that would be impossible to achieve without this secret partnership between the hammer and the flame. The cycle of hammering and annealing is a complete, elegant, and sophisticated system. It allows you to take a raw piece of metal from the earth and transform it into a complex and durable tool. But this raises a question that has puzzled historians for over a century. A question that seems to hint at a limitation, a failure to take the next logical step. If your people were the world's first and most prolific metallurgists, why did you stop there? Why didn't you invent smelting? From our modern perspective, we tend to see technology as a straight line, a ladder of progress that goes from stone to pure copper to smelted bronze to iron. It seems natural to ask why your culture never climbed to the next rung. But this question is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what smelting is and why it was invented. The answer to the paradox is remarkably simple. Smelting is a brilliant solution to a problem that you did not have. Smelting is not the act of melting metal. It is a complex chemical reaction. It is a process designed to take copper ore, a type of rock like green malachite or blue azurite, where the copper atoms are chemically bonded with other elements like oxygen, carbon, and sulfur, and break those chemical bonds to liberate the pure metal. To do this, you need to build a special furnace or kiln that can reach incredibly high temperatures. You then add the crushed ore along with a source of carbon, like charcoal, which acts as a reducing agent, effectively stealing the oxygen atoms from the copper and allowing the metal to flow free. It is one of the most important inventions in human history. But you have no need for it. The material you are pulling from the great pits is not copper ore. It is native copper, the metal already in its pure, elemental form. For you, trying to smelt copper would be as pointless as trying to bake a loaf of bread that has already been baked. All you would accomplish in your high-temperature furnace is melting the metal you already possessed. Now, contrast your situation with that of the ancient peoples of the Near East. In places like Anatolia and the Fertile Crescent, native copper existed, but it was incredibly rare. They experienced the same initial phase of cold hammering this scarce resource. But once it was gone, it was gone. What they had in abundance were mountains full of colorful copper ores. They were faced with a profound technological challenge. how to unlock the metal from this stone. Their desperation and ingenuity drove them to invent the complex process of smelting. It was a necessary breakthrough born from resource scarcity. You, on the other hand, live in a world of resource abundance. Your problem isn't a lack of pure metal. Your problem is that you have so much of it that you need an industrial scale system just to get it out of the ground. Furthermore, the product you create through your cold hammering and annealing cycle is arguably a superior material for tool making than early smelted metals. The repeated hammering compacts the copper's structure, creating a dense, tough, and work-hardened final product that is incredibly resistant to breaking. Early smelted and cast bronze, by contrast, was often brittle and full of impurities from the ore. So, in a strange way, the very richness and purity of your geological inheritance became a barrier to the next step. Your resource was simply too good. It removed the evolutionary pressure, the desperate need, that in other parts of the world led to the invention of smelting. This forces us to reconsider the whole idea of technology as a linear race. Your culture proves that it is not a ladder that everyone must climb in the same order, but a brilliant and unique adaptation to the specific gifts of the land you call home. Now, with the secrets of the copper in your hands, and the cycle of hammer and flame mastered, you can turn your attention to the purpose of it all, the creation of your toolkit. You have transformed the raw power of the underworld, the very essence of Mishipeshu, into an arsenal of elegant and brutally effective tools that will redefine your relationship with the world. Let's open your toolkit and begin with the sharp end of your business, the weapons of the hunt. Your most important creations are the projectile points for your spears and atlatl darts. You make them in a variety of styles, each suited for a different purpose. There are simple conical points, hammered into a sharp-tipped cone, easy to make and effective. There are tanged points, with a long, flat tail that can be inserted into a slot in a spear shaft and bound tightly. But your most advanced and innovative design is the socketed point. This is a true technological leap, something nearly impossible to achieve with stone. To create one, you begin by hammering a preform of copper, creating the blade of the spearhead. But you leave the base thick. Then, through a patient cycle of hammering and annealing, you begin to flatten and spread that thick base out into two thin wings, or flanges. You heat it one last time until it is soft, and then you carefully bend these wings around a tapered piece of wood, hammering them together until they form a perfect hollow cone, a socket. The genius of this design is its modularity. A stone point is painstakingly tied to its shaft. If the shaft breaks, the repair is a long and difficult process. But your socketed copper point simply slips snugly onto the tapered end of a spear shaft. If the shaft breaks in the heat of a hunt, you can retrieve the priceless copper head and fit it onto a new, pre-made shaft in a matter of seconds. This efficiency can mean the difference between a successful hunt and a dangerous failure. While these spear points are the workhorses of your arsenal, your craft is capable of producing objects of far greater scale and power. In a burial in what is now Wisconsin, archaeologists would one day unearth a masterpiece of your art, an object that defies easy categorization. It is a blade, 21 inches long, beautifully symmetrical, with a strong central ridge and gracefully curved, sharpened edges. It is, for all intents and purposes, a sword. This single artifact has sparked a fierce scholarly debate. Was it truly a sword, used for close-quarters combat? Or was it a massive spearhead? the kind of weapon you would need to hunt the largest and most dangerous game in your world, the great moose or the enraged black bear. Or perhaps its function wasn't practical at all. Perhaps its perfect form and immense size meant it was a ceremonial object, a symbol of a leader's power or a ritual tool for a shaman. Regardless of its purpose, its creation represents the absolute pinnacle of your craft. Holding it in your hand, you can read the story of its making. The surface is not perfectly smooth, but is covered in a million tiny overlapping facets, the telltale marks of the hammerstone. You can see the faint laminar lines in the metal, evidence of the countless times the copper was folded and forged, hammered and heated, purified and strengthened by the master artisan who made it. It is an object of immense presence and power. It is heavier than it looks, balanced and deadly. To create such a thing required not just skill, but an enormous amount of a precious, sacred resource. It is the culmination of the entire process, from the perilous journey across the water to the long, dark hours in the pit, to the patient dance of the hammer and the flame. Your toolkit is not just for taking life, it is for building it. While the elegant spear points are your tools for the hunt, you have another class of implements, a set of heavy, powerful, and brutishly effective tools designed for the single purpose of reshaping the forest itself. These are your axes, your adzes, and your gouges. They are the instruments that allow you to build your world. Unlike the sleek, thin projectile points, these tools are thick, massive, and heavy. You forge them not for piercing, but for impact. An axe head is a great wedge of solid copper, sometimes weighing 10 pounds or more, with a flaring, sharpened bit. An adze is shaped like an axe, but its blade is set perpendicular to the handle, like a powerful hoe, designed for shaping and carving wood. A gouge has a curved, U-shaped cutting edge, perfect for scooping out channels and hollows. These are the tools that let you fell the giants of the forest, clear land for your camps, and, most importantly, create the single most vital piece of technology in your world, the dugout canoe. In a landscape defined by the 5 Great Lakes and thousands of smaller ones, a reliable watercraft is not a luxury. It is a necessity. The canoe is your key to the best fishing grounds, your vehicle for trade, and the only way to undertake the great seasonal expeditions to the copper mines on islands like Royale. To build one, you must transform a massive tree into a sleek, swift, and stable vessel, a task that would be nearly impossible with the brittle, shatter-prone nature of stone tools. Modern experiments, a field known as experimental archaeology, have sought to replicate this ancient process, and the results are a stunning testament to your tool's effectiveness. You begin by selecting the right tree, a giant, straight-trunked white pine, perhaps 4 or 5 feet in diameter. Felling it is the first great challenge. With your heavy copper axe hafted onto a sturdy hickory handle, you begin to chop. The work is hard, the rhythmic thud of the axe echoing through the woods. Unlike a stone axe, which could shatter on a poorly aimed blow, your copper axe is durable. The edge may get blunted or dented, but it will not break. A few minutes with a sandstone whetstone, and its keen edge is restored. Hour after hour, you chop, and experiments have shown that a well-made copper axe can fell a large tree almost as efficiently as a modern steel one. Once the great tree is on the ground, the real work of shaping begins. You don't try to hollow out the massive log with brute force alone. Instead, you once again turn to your partnership with fire. You build a series of small, controlled fires along the top of the trunk, You let them burn for a while, charring the wood and making it soft and weak. Then you use your copper adzes and gouges to scrape away the blackened charcoal layer. The curved blade of the gouge is perfect for this, scooping out the softened wood with incredible speed. You repeat this process over and over. Burn, then scrape. Burn, then scrape. It is a slow, methodical, but highly efficient way to hollow out a log that is feet thick. With your copper tools, you shape the prow, thin the sides, and create a craft that is both immensely strong and surprisingly swift on the water. This single tool, the dugout canoe, born from the marriage of fire and your copper adze, is what holds your widespread society together, the thread that connects your scattered communities into a great, interconnected world. Your heavy axes and adzes allow you to conquer the forest and the water, but you also possess a suite of smaller, more delicate copper tools designed to harvest the incredible bounty that swims beneath the waves. It is here, in your fishing kit, that we may find the answer to the biggest question of all. Why? Why go to all this trouble? Why risk your lives on the great water and toil for months in the deep pits? The answer may lie in a single, elegant, and deceptively simple invention, the copper fishhook. You create them in various sizes. A long, thin piece of copper is hammered and sharpened at one end. Then, using the patient cycle of hammering and annealing, you carefully bend it back on itself, forming the tight, perfect curve that is the secret to its success. You might add a small notch or flatten the other end to make it easier to tie to a line made of nettle fiber or animal sinew. The final product is a simple, barbless hook, and it is a revolution. Before copper, you had to rely on hooks carved from bone or wood. These were serviceable, but they had a fatal flaw. To get the curve, you had to carve away material, creating a weak point right where the most stress is applied. A large, powerful fish could snap a bone hook with a single violent thrash. But copper is different. It is malleable. You don't carve the curve, you bend it. The internal structure of the metal flows, creating a continuous, unbroken curve of incredible strength and resilience. This is the core of what is known as the malleability hypothesis. This theory proposes that this one unique property of copper, the ability to be bent into a strong, reliable hook, was the technological breakthrough that kick-started your entire industry and transformed your society. With a set of reliable copper hooks, you are no longer limited to spearing fish in the shallows. From your dugout canoe, you can now paddle out into the deep, open water of the Great Lakes and fish for the huge, fat lake trout and salmon that live there, a vast and previously untouchable source of food. Even more importantly, the copper hook revolutionizes the lean winter months. Before, ice fishing was a difficult and often unproductive affair of spearing through a hole in the ice, a game of patience and luck. But now, you can chop a hole, drop a line with a copper hook baited with a minnow, and reliably pull up fish all winter long. This is not just a new fishing technique, it is the key to year-round food security. This stable, predictable source of protein changes everything. It means less risk of starvation during the hard winters. It means your children are healthier and more likely to survive to adulthood. It means your population, for the first time, can begin to grow steadily. While not all archaeologists agree it was the sole driver, the malleability hypothesis offers a powerful and elegant explanation for the boom of your culture. And here is where the loop closes. A larger, growing population needs more food. More food requires more of the reliable copper fishhooks. A greater demand for fishhooks creates a greater demand for raw copper, and a larger, healthier population provides the one crucial resource you need for the massive, organized mining expeditions: a large, available labor force. The simple, graceful curve of a single fishhook, it seems, created the need, the motivation, and the means for the entire old copper phenomenon. It was an engine of prosperity, a virtuous cycle of innovation, population growth, and industrial effort that was all sparked by the discovery that a certain red stone doesn't break, it bends. The humble fishhook may have been the engine of your new economy, but it was far from the only tool you created to dominate the aquatic world. Your mastery of copper allowed you to forge an entire arsenal of specialized fishing equipment, including heavy-duty weapons designed for the true monsters of the deep. For the largest and most powerful fish, you developed the copper harpoon. These are formidable tools, often a foot long or more, with a heavy, socketed base to fit onto a thick spear shaft. Some are simple, massive points, but your most effective designs include sharp, backward-facing barbs. Once this harpoon head is driven into the flesh of a giant fish, the barbs ensure it cannot be pulled out. This is the weapon you need for the ancient armored sturgeon that cruise the bottoms of the great lakes and rivers. These are true river monsters, often growing longer than a man and weighing hundreds of pounds. Hunting one is less like fishing and more like a battle. It requires a heavy dugout canoe, a strong line attached to the harpoon head, and an immense amount of courage and skill to land such a beast. Alongside the heavy harpoon, you created a tool of ingenious and deadly design, known as a lister spear. It is a three-pronged weapon, but unlike a simple trident, its form is far more clever. It has a sharp, central spike designed to impale the fish. Flanking this central spike are two curved, flexible copper tines that act as a clamp. When you thrust the lister at a fish, the central point strikes home, and the two outer tines spread slightly and then spring back, pinning the fish's body between them. Once caught in a lister, a fish has almost no chance of escape. To truly understand the elegance of this tool, you must see it in action. Picture yourself now. The sun has set, and a sliver of moon hangs in a star-filled sky. The lake is a sheet of black, still glass. You are standing perfectly balanced in the prow of your dugout canoe as it glides silently through the water. In one hand, you hold a long-handled pine torch, its flickering flame dripping sizzling pitch into the water. The light illuminates a golden, shimmering circle in the depths below, a bubble of day in the surrounding night. The fish, attracted and mesmerized by the light, begin to rise from the depths. In your other hand, you hold the lister spear, its three copper points gleaming in the torchlight. You are a statue of perfect stillness, your eyes scanning the illuminated water. A shadow detaches from the darkness. A large walleye, its eyes like glowing marbles, hovers just beneath the surface, captivated by the flame. Your muscles tense. In one swift, silent, fluid motion, you thrust the spear downward. There is a muted splash, a brief, thrashing explosion of water, and then you lift the spear. The walleye is held fast, impaled on the central spike and pinned by the two outer tines. The sheer variety and specialization of your fishing gear, from the tiniest hooks for panfish to these massive harpoons and clever listers, shows that fishing was not just a casual supplement to your diet. It was the absolute cornerstone of your economy and your culture, as central to your identity as the bison was to the peoples of the Great Plains. The great copper axes and harpoons speak to the grand scale of your society, your ability to conquer the wilderness and haul in great surpluses of food. But the true measure of a technology's impact is often found not in the spectacular, but in the small, everyday objects that make life easier, safer, and more comfortable. Let's move away from the hunt and the canoe and back to the warmth of the hearth fire to see how copper has transformed your domestic world. In your hand, you hold a tool you use a dozen times a day, your copper knife. While you make many styles, one of the most common and effective is the ulu, a beautiful crescent-shaped blade. You form it by hammering a piece of copper into a flat sheet, trimming it into a half moon, and then sharpening the curved outer edge. The straight inner edge is often thickened, and sometimes you add a clever twist to the metal, creating a built-in handle that provides a secure and comfortable grip. This knife is not a weapon of war, but a tool of daily life. It is perfect for slicing fillets of fish, for dicing wild leeks and mushrooms, for scraping a hide clean, or for any of the countless small cutting tasks that need doing around the camp. Next to your knife lies an even simpler, but perhaps more essential tool, the copper awl. It is little more than a sharpened spike of copper, often with a flat tang on the end, that you set into a handle of carved wood or deer antler. In a world without woven cloth, where all of your clothing, your bags, and much of your shelter are made from the hides of animals, the awl is indispensable. Its purpose is to punch clean, neat holes in tough leather, allowing you to lace or sew the pieces together. Before copper, you used awls of sharpened bone, but they were a constant source of frustration, frequently snapping when you tried to force them through a tough piece of moose or bear hide. Your copper awl, however, is strong and resilient. It can be sharpened to a needle point, and it can be pushed through the thickest leather without breaking, making the work of tailoring your family's clothes and mending your wigwam's covering faster and more reliable. But the true jewel of your domestic toolkit is the tiny, delicate-eyed copper needle. Creating one is a mark of a true master of the craft. It requires you to painstakingly hammer a small piece of copper into a long, thin but strong wire, sharpening one end to a point and flattening the other. Then comes the hardest part, punching a tiny, clean eye in the flattened end without breaking the delicate form. The result is a tool that your ancestors could only have dreamed of. A bone needle is, by necessity, somewhat thick and fragile. But your copper needle is thin, strong, and smooth. It can pass through leather with minimal resistance and allows for incredibly fine, tight stitching. This is more than just a practical improvement. This single tool transforms the craft of making clothes. With it, you can create garments that are not just functional, but are beautifully tailored and fitted. The seams are tighter, making your winter parkas warmer and more windproof. And the fine needle allows for decorative work that was previously impossible, like sewing on delicate shell beads or applying intricate patterns of dyed porcupine quills. The presence of these fine domestic tools proves that copper was not just a technology for hunting or mining. Its integration into the fabric of daily life shows that its impact was felt by everyone in your society, fundamentally changing the way you clothed, fed, and sheltered yourselves. Your toolkit is vast, and while the function of most of your creations is clear, an axe for chopping, a hook for fishing, some objects you leave behind will continue to puzzle archaeologists for thousands of years. These are the enigmas in copper, the artifacts whose exact purpose remains a subject of intense debate, hinting at technologies and practices that we are only just beginning to understand. Among the most intriguing of these are objects that look for all the world like modern drill bits. You craft them from a solid rod of copper, hammering it to have a square or rectangular cross-section, and sharpening the tip to a cutting point. Were these, in fact, the world's first metal drills? Used with a bow drill, a simple but effective tool that spins a shaft with high speed, such a copper bit would be incredibly effective at boring clean, precise holes in wood. It would be a massive improvement over a stone drill, which grinds through abrasion and is prone to breaking. But this raises an even more tantalizing question. Could you have used them to drill stone? This question becomes particularly relevant when we consider another mysterious object from your time, the banner stone. These are among the most beautiful and enigmatic artifacts of the entire archaic period. A banner stone is a piece of attractive, often colorful stone, like banded slate or granite, that has been painstakingly ground and polished into a perfectly symmetrical, winged or butterfly-like shape. And right through its center is a perfectly straight, smooth-bore hole. The mainstream explanation, and the one you will find in most textbooks, is that these objects were weights for atlatls, or spear throwers. The theory is that adding this weight to the atlatl adds mass and a flywheel effect, allowing you to throw a spear with greater force and stability. But many researchers have found this explanation lacking. The sheer amount of labor required to create a banner stone seems excessive for a simple tool component. The grinding and polishing would take weeks, and the drilling of that perfect central hole is an incredible feat. Doing it with a reed and sand abrasive drill would take hundreds of hours of patient work. This has led some to suggest a more ceremonial or spiritual purpose, that these were not tools, but symbols of power or sacred objects. The existence of your copper drills, however, offers a compelling alternative. A tough copper bit, used with sand and water, could have made the difficult process of drilling these banner stones significantly easier, perhaps explaining how and why so many of these beautiful objects were created. The final piece of the puzzle shows that your two technologies, stone and copper, were not in competition, but worked in harmony. You, a master of metal, are also still a master of stone, and you use one to perfect the other. For the final delicate sharpening of a flint spear point, you use a pressure flaker. This is a tool with a fine, durable point used to press off tiny, razor-thin flakes to create the sharpest possible edge. While antler tines work well, a small pointed rod of work-hardened copper is even better. It is less prone to slipping and can apply a more controlled, precise pressure. You are using your new metal technology to create a superior Stone Age weapon. You are not a Stone Age person or a Copper Age person. You are a master of materials, using the unique properties of each: the sharpness of flint, the toughness of antler, the malleability of copper, in a sophisticated and integrated system to thrive in your world. You have created a world of technological marvels, an arsenal of copper tools that has allowed you to thrive. But what kind of society do you live in? What are your values? Your tools can tell us more than just how you hunted or fished. The way they are distributed among your people can give us a profound insight into the very structure of your community. And the most revealing clues you leave behind are in the way you treat your dead. Archaeologists know that burials are a powerful mirror of a living society. The objects that people are buried with, or the lack thereof, can speak volumes about their status, their role, and what their culture valued. When we look at the burials of the great Bronze Age societies in Eurasia, the pattern is often very clear. A king, a pharaoh, or a great warlord is laid to rest in a magnificent tomb, surrounded by a breathtaking horde of wealth. Bronze swords and armor, golden masks, intricate jewelry. The graves of the common people, by contrast, contain little more than a simple clay pot. This pattern shows a highly stratified, hierarchical society, a steep pyramid with a powerful ruling class at the top and everyone else at the bottom. When we look at your burials, the picture is startlingly different. There are no great tombs filled with hoarded treasure. There are no kingly burials that stand dramatically apart from all the others. Instead, the evidence suggests a society built on a much flatter and more equitable model. The key piece of evidence is the copper itself. These precious, laboriously won artifacts are found in the graves of many different kinds of people. A man might be buried with the copper spear points and axes he used in his life, but a woman might be buried with her own essential copper tools, like her ulu knife and the fine awls and needles she used for her craft. Even more poignantly, archaeologists have found children's graves containing beautiful copper ornaments, like a string of carefully hammered beads or a small copper bracelet. This is perhaps the most powerful evidence of all. It tells us that this sacred and valuable material was not monopolized by a small elite. It was not a symbol reserved only for the powerful male warriors. Access to it was widespread, distributed throughout the community. This suggests that you live in what anthropologists call an egalitarian society. While some individuals might be more respected for their skill as a hunter or a healer, there is no permanent, inherited class structure. You live in a world without kings. This raises a fascinating and still debated question for historians. Was this egalitarianism the secret to your success, or a hidden vulnerability? On one hand, this cooperative, non-hierarchical social structure may have been the very thing that enabled your greatest achievements. Perhaps the massive, coordinated labor of the copper mines was only possible because it was a communal effort for the common good, not the forced labor of a peasantry for the benefit of a king. Your society's stability and incredible longevity, spanning thousands of years, might be a testament to the strength of this fairness. On the other hand, did the lack of a strong, centralized leadership make your culture less able to adapt to rapid, large-scale crises? When faced with sudden climate change or the arrival of new peoples with different social structures, was your consensus-based society simply too slow to change, too fragile to hold together? The answer remains buried with you. Your egalitarian society is not an isolated bubble. While your home is the northern forests and the shores of the great water, the influence of your copper creations extends far beyond, touching communities across the entire continent. The sacred red metal is a desirable and powerful substance, and it begins to move, traveling along ancient pathways of connection and exchange, creating a vast network that crisscrosses half of North America. We can map this network today with incredible precision thanks to modern science. The copper from your Lake Superior homeland has a unique geochemical signature, a fingerprint of trace elements like silver. When an archaeologist in, say, Louisiana, finds a 7,000-year-old copper artifact, a scientist in a lab can analyze its composition and say with certainty that the metal was mined from the Keweenaw Peninsula or Isle Royale. This science allows us to trace the invisible threads of your ancient trade routes, and those threads stretch for thousands of miles. From your homeland in the Great Lakes, your copper travels down the great river highways of the continent. It moves down the Wisconsin and Illinois rivers to the mighty Mississippi. And from there, it journeys all the way south to the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Great Lakes copper artifacts have been found at Poverty Point in Louisiana, one of the most complex and mysterious archaeological sites in North America. The copper also travels east across the lower Great Lakes and through the river valleys of the Appalachians, reaching the Atlantic coast in what is now New York. It moves west, passed from group to group, out onto the vast grasslands of the Great Plains. This was not a one-way street. You did not give this precious, sacred material away for free. In return, other valuable goods flowed back north along these same routes. Perhaps the most important commodity you sought was a resource you lacked in your own territory. Truly exceptional stone for making your finest tools. While you had serviceable flint, the master knappers among you coveted the beautiful high-quality materials from the south. The glossy, multicolored Flint Ridge chert from Ohio, or the tough, almost sugary Hickston silicified sandstone from southern Wisconsin. You would trade a bundle of finished copper awls or a fine socketed spear point for a cache of this superior stone. From the distant Gulf Coast came other treasures. Huge, beautiful marine shells like the whelk, whose spiral shape held a sacred power. You would carve these into intricate pendants and gorgets, bringing the power of the Southern Ocean into your northern forests. It is important to understand that this was not a centrally controlled commercial empire. There were no copper barons sending out merchant caravans. The network was far more organic, a system that archaeologists call down-the-line trade. You, in your summer camp, might trade a few copper fish hooks to your neighbors just south of you in exchange for a basket of wild rice. They, in turn, might trade one of those hooks to their neighbors further south for a well-made pot. That pot might then be traded for some dried meat, and on and on. Through this chain of hundreds of small, personal exchanges, a single copper artifact could travel 1,000 miles from its source, passed from hand to hand, its meaning and value changing with each transaction, knitting a vast and diverse continent together in a web of silent, interconnected reciprocity. The great network you have built moves a physical substance across the continent. But it is crucial to remember that to you, the red metal is never just a material. A copper knife is never just a tool. It is imbued with the spirit and the power of the place it came from the deep earth and the underworld. A practical object and a sacred one are, in your worldview, the exact same thing. Archaeologists can debate whether the primary driver for your copper trade was utility or belief. But for you, this is a meaningless distinction. A tool's power comes as much from its spiritual essence as from its sharp edge. This sacred nature is most clearly expressed in the objects you make that have no obvious practical function. You take the precious metal and you transform it into things of pure beauty and power, ornaments to be worn on the body. You hammer the copper into paper-thin sheets and then roll these sheets into long, elegant, tube-shaped beads. You create pendants, sometimes in the form of animals, sometimes in abstract shapes that you hang from a cord around your neck. You make delicate rings for your ears and intricate bracelets for your wrists. These are not simple decorations, not mere jewelry in the modern sense. In a world that is alive with spirits, both helpful and harmful, to wear a piece of copper is to wear a shield. These ornaments are amulets, talismans of protection. Copper is the solidified power of the great lynx, Mishipeshu, and to wear a scale from his body is to carry a piece of his immense power with you, to guard your health and ward off evil influences. The very color of the metal is a source of its power. When you polish it, the copper glows with the warm, reddish-gold color of a sunset, but also, and more importantly, with the color of blood. blood is the river of life, the ultimate symbol of vitality and existence. To wear the red metal is to adorn yourself with a symbol of life's essence, to enhance your own life force. So you must remember the weight of the gift every time you use it. Imagine you are paddling your canoe back from Royale, your vessel low in the water, heavy with a cargo of the sacred red stone. The sky begins to darken, and the placid surface of Lake Superior turns into a field of choppy, menacing waves. The wind begins to howl. This is the anger of Mishipeshu. This is his displeasure at having his flesh torn from the rock, his scales carried away from his home. Fear tightens its grip on your heart. You reach up and touch the copper pendant that hangs around your neck, the one you made last season. It is cool and solid against your skin. It is a piece of him. You whisper a prayer, an apology, a sign of respect. You reach into your pouch for a handful of dried tobacco, another sacred gift, and you offer it to the waves, a humble gift to appease the Great Spirit's anger. To forget this respect, to treat the copper as a mere commodity, is to invite disaster. It is a lesson you never forget. For 3,000 years, your world was stable. The seasons followed their familiar rhythm. The forests were lush, the lakes were full, and the red metal gave you the tools you needed to thrive. Your culture grew and spread, your trade networks expanded, and your traditions were passed down through 100 generations. But no golden age lasts forever. Around 5,000 years ago, something begins to change. There is no single dramatic event of collapse, no great war or sudden catastrophe. Instead, it is a long goodbye, a slow fading over centuries, as the foundations of your world begin to crumble. And the first great blow comes from the sky itself. The climate, which had been your benevolent partner for so long, turns against you. The specific event, identified by paleoclimatologists in ice cores and sediment layers around the world, is known as the 5.3 kilo-year event. It was a sudden, sharp, and severe period of global cooling and drought. And for your home in the Great Lakes, the effects were catastrophic. The reliable rains begin to fail. The winters become harsher, the summers hotter and drier. The world, which for so long had been defined by an abundance of water, now begins to thirst. You witness the change with your own eyes. The Great Lakes, which had seemed as permanent and unchanging as the sky, begin to shrink. The water levels fall dramatically, exposing vast, stinking mudflats where there was once a thriving shoreline ecosystem. The bays and wetlands where you once harvested wild rice and hunted waterfowl dry up and turn to cracked earth. The rivers that were your highways, the arteries of your trade network, dwindle to shallow, unnavigable streams, their courses choked with sandbars. A canoe journey that once took a week now becomes an impossible overland slog. The entire ecosystem is thrown into chaos. The composition of the forests begins to change as drought-intolerant trees like hemlock and beech die off. Animal populations, stressed by the lack of water and the changing vegetation, begin to move or decline. But the most devastating impact is on the fish. The lower lake levels and warmer water temperatures would have decimated the populations of cold water fish, like trout and whitefish. The very species your copper technology was so perfectly designed to catch. The foundation of your food security, the reliable protein that fueled your population growth, is pulled out from under you. While few archaeologists believe climate change was the sole factor, many argue that this event was the primary shock to the system. For a culture so exquisitely adapted to a world of abundant water, this prolonged drought was a devastating crisis. Your entire way of life, your fishing techniques, your canoe-based transportation, your long-distance trade, was suddenly rendered obsolete by a hostile environment. The great seasonal expeditions to Isle Royale would have become a logistical nightmare, if not an impossibility. The social glue of those annual gatherings would have dissolved. Faced with hunger and uncertainty, your people would have been forced to break apart into smaller groups, abandoning the old ways and focusing on simple day-to-day survival. The great copper industry, born from a world of plenty, could not be sustained in this new, harsher world of scarcity. The Great Drought was a powerful external shock that battered your society, but it may have been amplified by a second, slower crisis that was unfolding from within. This problem was not an act of nature. It was a direct consequence of your own incredible multi-millennial success. You had become so good at finding and extracting copper that you were beginning to exhaust the easiest sources. The issue wasn't that the copper was running out. The land is still rich with it today. The problem was one of diminishing returns. The low-hanging fruit was gone. Think back on the long history of your industry. For the first few thousand years, your ancestors could rely on the bounty of the glaciers, the float copper. It was a simple matter of knowing where to look. But after 100 generations of sharp-eyed people scouring the landscape, the easy pickings were gone. The great multi-ton boulders and the convenient fist-sized nuggets had all been found and worked. So, you turned to the surface veins, the exposed seams of metal on cliffs and ridges. Using brute force, you chipped and pried and hammered away at these for centuries. But they, too, were a finite resource. The accessible parts were exhausted, leaving only the toughest, deepest sections of the veins, locked away in the heart of the rock. This forced you to become true miners, to rely solely on the difficult, ingenious, and incredibly labor-intensive technique of fire setting and digging the great pits. For a long time, this was a viable, if difficult, solution. But every pit you dug was a battle against a fundamental economic principle. The deeper you went, the more work you had to do for every single pound of copper you recovered. A pit that is 10 feet deep is more than twice as hard to work as a pit that is 5 feet deep. A pit that is 30 feet deep is exponentially harder still. You are fighting a war on multiple fronts. First, every foot deeper means you have to haul the waste rock, the useless shattered basalt, 1 foot higher to get it out of the way. Second, the problem of groundwater becomes relentlessly worse. A shallow pit might only need 1 or 2 people bailing to keep it dry. A deep pit might require a team of 10 people doing nothing but hauling water from dawn till dusk, a huge expenditure of labor that produces 0 copper. Miners often found that the ancient pits stopped abruptly right at the permanent water table, direct evidence of the point where your bailing technology was overwhelmed. You had hit a technological wall. Without dynamite to clear huge volumes of rock, and without industrial pumps to de-water the shafts, there was a hard limit to how deep you could go. The cost-benefit analysis that had fueled your culture for millennia was beginning to flip. The enormous cost, in time, in labor, in spiritual risk, in the sheer number of calories your miners burned every day, was no longer justified by the dwindling returns. Historians debate which factor was more significant, the climate crisis or resource depletion, but many believe the two forces worked in a devastating tandem. A society weakened by drought and hunger could no longer afford the exorbitant labor costs of deep mining, and a society whose primary resource was becoming ever harder to get was far less resilient when the rains stopped and the lakes began to shrink. The world is changing around you. The climate is harsh, and the once abundant copper is now harder to find. These physical pressures are immense, but they are accompanied by a third, and perhaps most powerful, force of change. It is not a crisis of the environment or of resources, but a crisis of the mind and spirit. A wave of new ideas, new technologies, and new social values is beginning to ripple northward from the great river valleys of the south, and it will transform your world forever. You are living at the end of what archaeologists will call the archaic period, the dawn of a new era, the woodland period. Breaking. From the south, new inventions are arriving, passed along the same trade routes that once carried your copper. The most significant of these is pottery. For the first time, you have durable, fire-proof containers for cooking and storing food, a simple but revolutionary technology. At the same time, the first whispers of a new way of life are arriving, the idea of agriculture. It's not the corn and beans of later times, but the cultivation of native plants like squash, sunflowers, and marsh elder. This ability to produce even a small amount of food, rather than just gather it, encourages you to become more sedentary, to stay in one place for longer. This shift away from a purely mobile lifestyle has profound consequences. As your villages become larger and more permanent, your social structure begins to change. The old, flat, egalitarian model that served your nomadic ancestors so well begins to give way to new, more complex and hierarchical systems. Lineages and clans become more important. Religious specialists and charismatic leaders begin to accumulate more prestige and influence. Society is slowly beginning to stratify, and in this new social order, the meaning and value of copper undergoes a radical transformation. In the old world, copper's value was in its utility. It was a democratic metal, its worth measured by the number of fish it could catch or the quality of the clothes it could sew for your family. But in this new world, its value shifts from the practical to the symbolic. As the metal becomes harder and more expensive to acquire due to resource depletion, its very rarity makes it more precious. It ceases to be a material for the common person's toolkit and becomes a substance reserved for the powerful, a way for the emerging elite to display their status and their connection to the sacred. You do not forget how to make a copper axe. You simply choose not to. The technology is not lost. Its purpose is redefined. The small amount of copper that still trickles through the trade networks is now directed toward a new kind of craft. Instead of axes and awls, your artisans begin creating breathtaking, non-functional objects of pure belief and prestige. They create large, polished breastplates called gorgets to be worn by clan leaders. They craft intricate, spool-shaped earrings and panpipes sheathed in gleaming copper foil for religious ceremonies. Wooden carvings of sacred animals are covered in thin, hammered sheets of the metal. Many archaeologists now believe this cultural transformation is the ultimate explanation for the end of your era. The environmental and resource crises were the powerful catalysts that broke the old system, but the final change was a profound shift in your own heart and mind. Making a sacred ornament for a chief was now a higher, more potent use of the divine metal than making a simple fishhook for a fisherman. The age of the copper tool was over. The age of the copper treasure had begun. And so, the long arc of your story comes to a close. It began with the violent, deep-time miracle of the Earth's formation, a billion-year-old secret of pure metal locked away in the planet's crust. It was a story delivered by the immense grinding power of the ice, which quarried this treasure and scattered it across a new, raw world. It was a story of a single transformative discovery, a stone that bends instead of breaks. From that one impossible fact, an entire culture was born. A culture that developed a sophisticated metallurgy without furnaces, a system of mining on an industrial scale without a ruling class, and a toolkit of elegant and powerful copper implements that allowed them to master their environment. You built a world held together by river highways and the exchange of sacred metal, a society that endured in a state of remarkable stability for 5,000 years. And then, faced with a convergence of crises, a changing climate, dwindling resources, and a profound shift in your own values, your unique culture slowly, quietly faded, transforming into something new and leaving behind a 10,000-year-old mystery. The importance of your story cannot be overstated. It is a powerful rebuttal to the old, simplistic ideas of history that saw technology as a single, linear race that began in the old world and spread outwards. Your culture is one of the great proofs that human ingenuity is not a monolithic force. It is a creative, adaptive, and diverse spirit that arises in different peoples, in different places, and at different times, to meet the specific needs and opportunities of their unique worlds. You prove that there is not one path of progress, but many. And yet, for all that we have learned from your tools and your minds, the silence you left behind is immense. We can hold your copper axe in our hands and feel its heft and balance. We can marvel at the craftsmanship of a delicate needle, but we cannot know what you called yourselves. We do not know the sound of your language, the words of your songs, the narratives of your creation stories. We can see the evidence of your reverence for the spirits of the world, but we cannot know the precise details of your ceremonies or the names of your gods. The archaeological record gives us the physical skeleton of your world, but its living, breathing soul remains an elusive and poignant mystery. But perhaps not all is lost. The story may not truly end with the last copper axe. The people themselves did not vanish. They adapted, they changed, and their descendants are the living indigenous peoples of the Great Lakes today, the Anishinaabe, the Menominee, and others. And when you listen to the stories of an Anishinaabe elder, when you hear the oral traditions passed down through countless generations, you can sometimes hear a faint but powerful echo from the distant past. When they speak of the sacredness of copper, when they tell stories of Mishipeshu, the great horned lynx who guards the metal at the bottom of the Great Lake, it is impossible not to wonder. You are hearing more than just a myth. You are perhaps listening to the last living thread of a worldview, a spiritual understanding of the world that first began to take shape 10 millennia ago, when an ancestor first picked up a strange, heavy, gleaming red stone from the shore of a freshly born world. And so, our journey through the deep past comes to its gentle conclusion. The phantom sounds of hammering and the whispers of ancient stories begin to fade, leaving only the soft hum of the room around you. The world of the great lynx and the red metal recedes, like a canoe slipping silently away into the morning mist on a vast and quiet lake. The immense weight of those 10,000 years can now be set aside, leaving your own mind feeling lighter, calmer, and ready for its own quiet journey into stillness and sleep. Let the final images dissolve, the sharp edges of ancient tools softening into the gentle blur of encroaching slumber. There are no more problems to solve tonight, no more mysteries of the past to ponder. There is only the simple, peaceful rhythm of your own breathing, a quiet and steady presence in the soft darkness of your room. The story is told, and now it is time for rest.